Hi everyone, and welcome to Tuesday's Tips with Laurie. Today I have a special guest. I have Brittany here with me. She's going to be helping with one of our little projects that we're going to do. To start with, I know a lot of you had questions on stabilizer. What's the difference between a stabilizer and interfacing? There's a little bit of a difference. It's not big. I'm just going to go over a general difference, for our purposes here at Kimberbell, and what we do with our embroidery designs. A lot of people have said, well, I think interfacing is the same. I think the stabilizer is the same. The slight difference would be interfacing is something that is meant to be put in a project and kept in that project. And most stabilizers you're going to find come in three different kinds, three basic kinds. Your dissolvable that's water soluble, a tearaway, and a cutaway. And those purposes would be to cut it out of your project, to tear it out of your project, or to water soluble, dissolve it out of your project. So that would be kind of the basic differences. Obviously, all stabilizers come in different capacities as well. You've got your heavy tearaway and light tearaway. You've got heavy cutaway. You've got your light cutaway. We use a medium cutaway here. And so I know some people have mentioned that they've had a project where we had mentioned to use cutaway, and they had a really hard time flipping their project because it was so stiff. So what I would recommend is going to a little lighter weight stabilizer. So as far as stabilizers go, really a stabilizer then is something that you use on a project or a product that you can remove later, and it's there to stabilize or support your project while you're making it. And that's the main differences. So today I'd like to go over how you could float stabilizer if you run into a problem. So if you're running into a problem of an embroidery project and it starts to pucker on you and you're getting really frustrated, before I start, if it's a heavy stitching out project, a lot of stitches, and it calls, for example, a wash away stabilizer or a sew and wash stabilizer or a dissolve, anything that's a water soluble, you might want to just double that stabilizer right then before you start your project. Now what we've got here today is we're going to be stitching out our little Mylar balloons from our Hello Sunshine, and we love this. And I noticed a lot of people out there are making their Hello Sunshine quilts right now, and it's so fun to see. So when you're finishing up and you're doing your embellishments and you're doing the Mylar part, when you get to this part, and notice I have only got one layer, but this is it's a fibrous wash away, so it's pretty, it's really strong. So I've only got a single layer here. But here's, Brittany's gonna cut this for me, and she's at the stage now where we have stitched the inside of the balloons, and now she's gonna trim the tulle and the Mylar from outside around those balloons. So I'm gonna let her go to it, and you can film her doing that.
So you'll notice how we have each of our layers taped down with Kimberbell paper tape. And this is a really great product if you don't like having the sticky residue on your project. It doesn't leave any residue, and it tears away really easily so that it won't tear the stitches out of your project. So it's really great for those purposes. And it does not
gum up your needles.
Yeah,
you can stitch right over this tape and it will not gum up your needle.
So I'm just going to remove this tape so I can cut around. And Laurie, do I cut all three layers at once, or what do you recommend?
Brittany, great question. We do recommend that you cut the top layer, and then you can tear the tulle. It actually will rip away. And then you can cut the bottom layer. You can also cut all three at the same time. It's a personal preference. It's up to you. Okay. We do recommend a 3-layer approach if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm all about getting it done fast.
And I'm sure a lot of you out there feel the same way. So as we're going along, and we've had this happen many times in testing, and I'm sure you've had it happen before, where you're going along, you're doing a great job, by the way, Brittany.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And as she's cutting, once in a while we tend to, I mean, none of us are perfect at cutting. We're trying so careful to not cut this back stabilizer, right? Because the very next stitch is a satin stitch that's going to go back and forth across. So what happens if you do cut right through that stabilizer? And that is what we're going to show you today, because it's happened to us, and we've got kind of a tip. It's called floating your stabilizer. And so as Brittany's cutting there,
can't get the stabilizer.
It's really hard for her to cut that stabilizer. It's just a, you know, natural thing to try not to, right?
It is. But sometimes it just happens. So there we go. Oh, I have torn through the stabilizer right there.
And sometimes the stabilizer will tear as it's stitching if it's got a lot of heavy stitching and you feel like, oh no, it's starting to pull.
So you can see that hole there, that I've got this hole in my stabilizer now.
Do not fret. No worries, we can fix that. So go ahead, and I'm going to let you finish trimming around that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to float some stabilizer. So we're going to get the exact same stabilizer that we have here that we're using on the back.
And is this the water soluble?
Yes, this is the water soluble. And I recommend, even if you have a cutaway you're using on the back and you accidentally cut through the cutaway where you shouldn't have cut, and you're going to be stitching and you don't want that to pull, because the minute the stitches start happening, the satin stitching, it's going to pull and it's going to suck that and it's going to give it a funny look. It's not going to stay true to the shape that it needed to stay. So what you do is, even if you've got, say, cutaway on the back, I would recommend that you use the water-soluble stabilizer. And what we're going to do, it's called the floating method, and there's different ways of floating it. You don't have to do it this exact way if you have another way of floating, but basically you're going to patch it, so to speak. That's what a floating stabilizer is. And the reason we call it floating stabilizer, because it floats over the top of your project. So Brittany's cut another piece, and we're going to place it right over the top of that. And you don't have to worry, the stitching is going to go right through that, but this is water soluble. So it's going to disappear just like your backing stabilizer.
Perfect.
Now if you'd like, and what I do recommend is that your piece is big enough, I like to make it big enough to cover wherever my stitches are going to land, so that I've got it doubled. So I would maybe apply a small piece of tape to tape those two stabilizers together in the back. And then you can simply put your project right back in, and it will start doing the stitching right over the top of that.
Perfect. And I like to tape on a hard surface. It's a lot easier for me to press that down and make sure that it attaches securely.
That is a great tip.
Okay.
You don't want to pop it out of your hoop, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And then you just put this back in. I'll let you go ahead and install it.
Perfect.
Now we're going to skip down to the next one, because right here is where the rip was, if you remember right. It was, the tear was down here. So we're going to do the satin stitch and start running it right along that, so you can see what it would look like. And no fret, you're thinking, oh no, I've lost my balloon, I can't see my balloon. No worries. And you can see it actually is, before the satin stitch starts, it's tacking down this piece that you started floating. Now you may ask, what happens if I'm partway through my satin stitching and I notice that it's starting to rip or tear? You can stop at that very point. You can put your extra stabilizer down, and you can start right then as well. We've done that before as well. And so anytime you're doing something that tears or rips your stabilizer, you can add this extra piece of stabilizer. It's just called floating. You just float it right across. You can float it from the back side as well.
So is that what you would do with cutaway stabilizer? Is float it from the back?
You could float cutaway from the back.
Okay.
Yes, you could.
Okay.
If you float it from the back, make sure it's taped in place so that it doesn't float away.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as you can see, it's going to, it just does a beautiful stitch right over the top. And I'm hoping that you'll get to see when it comes back to where it was cut, how well it stitches right through there as well. And while this is stitching out, let me just go over a couple of these stabilizers. So for example, they do have adhesive wash away and adhesive tear away both. We have both of those here. Like I said, we've got, it comes in wide or narrow, whichever projects. If you're doing a lot of tea towels, for example, you definitely just want to maybe get the more narrow one. You can maybe even make double cuts so you can fit 2 5x7 hoops side by side on the larger ones. Tearaway comes in a couple of different, this is more of a soft feeling tearaway, and it leaves a little bit of a soft edge where you tear it away. Whereas there are some other tearaways out there that rip just like a piece of paper and it comes right off. So whichever way your project, what it calls for, I recommend reading the instructions. Use what's on the recommendations. And we will go over next week. I wanted to talk about Shape Flex. I know Shape Flex is a big deal. It's great. It's really a good product. But it's a little bit different than either one of the stabilizers because it's a permanent. It's something that's permanently left in your project. So do think about that before you use Shape Flex, that it's something, unless you cut it away right at the edge, just like your cutaway stabilizer. So, and you can see here how it's right here, I don't know if you can see right in there, where the stabilizer in the back was ripped, how smooth those satin stitches went right around there. And we can pull this off. If I had a sink right here, I would dip it right in the water so you could see exactly what it would look like. But if any of you have ever tried floating stabilizer, give me some of your tips and your tricks that you've used to float stabilizer to fix that very problem. And I'll let you pull this out. We can flip it over and show you the back. Can you see where it was ripped right here? And can you see how that did not pull it held the stabilizer on the back for you by adding that top piece and floating it. Can you see how pretty that turned out?
Yeah, that
turned out. So
that turned out great.
Yeah, and these balloons are great because you can use them from the front or the back. Either way. So thank you so much, Brittany.
Yeah,
I appreciate
you're
you sharing your talents with us today.
Yes.
And let us know if there's any other stabilizers that you'd like to talk about next week, because we're going to talk about Shape Flex for sure. And let me know if there's anything else. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.